Welcome to Passing the Plate, the podcast that's all about food, traditions, and the wonderful connections they create. I'm Lisa Lisson, the genealogist and family history expert behind Are You My Cousin?
And I'm Ashley Covelli, the food writer and recipe developer behind Big Flavors from a Tiny Kitchen. We'll be your guides on this flavor-packed adventure. We're not just talking about recipes. We're diving into family history, exploring new cultures, and preserving favorite recipes for future generations. In short, we're celebrating the stories and tastes that come with every bite.
So grab a seat at the table and let's embark on a journey of flavor, tradition, and connection. This is Passing the Plate, where every episode is a feast for the senses and a celebration of the ties that nourish our souls.
In this episode, we're talking about one of the world's most beloved handheld desserts, the cookie. Now, Lisa, I have a feeling I know what type of cookies you might prefer. Do they contain chocolate by chance?
Why? Yes, they do. Of course they do. It's the chocolate chip cookie. That is my favorite cookie.
Classic.
It's a classic. And yes, I mean, you just can't go wrong. It's also probably one of the first cookies I learned how to make. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's part of it as well. I will say a second favorite is a really good oatmeal cookie. I love a good oatmeal cookie. And then, of course, I like ginger snaps. But so apparently, if you looked at my family tree, you would probably find the Cookie Monster somewhere as a distant cousin.
So I love a classic chocolate chip cookie, but this brought back the memory of way back when my son was like 4 or 5 years old. We were in a big Mo Willems phase. I don't know if you're familiar. He's an author of children's books, an illustrator. He does there's a Elephant and Piggy series. There's a whole series about the pigeon. So don't let the pigeon drive the bus. Mm-hmm. And there's one with the pigeon called The Duckling Gets a Cookie. And in the book, they talk about this chocolate chip cookie with nuts. So I made, inspired by that with him, we made the Ducklings chocolate chip cookies with toasted nuts. And it's such a fun, I don't know, it was just a fun way to kind of bring the food from a book that we loved to life. Man, I need to make that again. It's been a while. So
sounds wonderful. Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm curious, with your chocolate chip cookies, do you go classic semi-sweet chocolate? Do you like to do dark? You like a mix?
I really go classic, just a semi-sweet chocolate. To be honest, I use the recipe on the back of the Nestle Stollhouse cookies. I mean, that's always been kind of my go-to. And, I oftentimes do find that the recipe on the back of a box or bag of anything is usually turns out to be one of my favorites. Yeah. But it's also a recipe designed for that particular product, which I think, obviously lends itself to being a very good recipe and reliable.
Yeah. And I gotta say, I'm not the hugest white chocolate fan, but Subway's white chocolate macadamia nut cookies have been a favorite since I was a kid. I don't particularly care for Subway. My son enjoys it. And those cookies, that white chocolate chip macadamia combo just really works together.
I've seen that. I've seen recipes for that. I've also seen the white chocolate chip with the craisins.
Mm-hmm. Those are good too. Yeah,
I think I got that off the craisin bag. So you can see where I get my recipes. But hey, it works. Marketing works apparently for me.
They make the bag for a reason, They make
That's
it on
right.
there. So I know we talked about peanuts last week. Peanut butter cookies are certainly one of my favorites. And aside from, we got the classic chocolate chip peanut butter. I also really have a soft spot for my grandma's classic cutout sugar cookies. She would always make them for Christmas, and it's something that I've kept going with my family. I like it as a Christmas tradition. It just doesn't feel like Christmas unless I have those cookies. But I don't only use it at Christmas, because why not enjoy it all year round? You can do hearts for Valentine's Day. As we're recording this, Halloween is coming up, so I've done cats and bats and ghosts and pumpkins for Halloween. So you can really, it works all year round. St. Patrick's Day, Easter, you can just cut it in rounds and decorate them for whatever.
I love sugar cookies, the cutout sugar cookies. We've done those for years at our house as well. The recipe I use is the Betty Crocker's cookie book. I've mentioned that book before. And so it was one my mom used. It was just, she actually would have it starred, and then she made little adjustments in the margins. I think she, instead of using vanilla extract, added lemon extract at some point. So we'll continue to do that today. It's really delicious that way.
Only lemon or a mix of lemon and vanilla?
Just lemon.
Oh,
just lemon.
Nice.
And so it's one that I seem to really. So that's the one I tend to use and really enjoy that. I still actually have some of the same cookie cutters. You probably do too. Like from when I was a child, my kids, have used them. So they are still a little bent at this point. Some of them are, but it just makes for a more fun cookie. It's a little quirky
cookie.
Oh, quirky. I can't even say that. A quirky
That's
cookie.
a tongue twister.
That is a tongue twister. And of course, I have the cookbook, which no longer has a front or back cover to it because it's been used so much they fell off. But don't worry, I still have them. It's been loved. So it's definitely it's a lot of memories and memory lanes when we break out the sugar cookie recipe.
Yeah. Do you use metal cookie cutters or plastic or a combination?
At the end of the day, I use a combination, but I prefer my metal ones. I just think they get a cleaner cut. And it's just one I prefer better. I prefer more, but I do have both.
Yeah. I want to say my grandma had metal ones, and I did at some point, but I have all plastic ones now. I think that part of it is if you roll out on a mat, like a silicone mat, and you use metal cookie cutters, you could damage it.
Yeah.
But I think it depends on the recipe. I get pretty good edges with this particular recipe, like crisp edges, even with the plastic cookie cutters. But you can also, my son loves to freeform it. He'll just take a knife and just like cut out whatever shape he wants, and that's also a fun way to do it.
That's fun. That sounds good. I'm not a good freehand for that, but I'm gonna have to try that sometime.
Yeah. Why? Just go with wherever the dough is speaking to you, just go with that shape,
No, I need a plan. I just need a plan. I'm a planner. I need a plan.
Maybe it would be like exposure therapy. Like you just, the purpose is to go in without a plan and see what comes up.
See what happens.
See how you deal with it.
I'll let you know how that goes.
Yeah. Well, and then marrying into an Italian family, I came across some new to me types of cookies too. Things that I had never even heard of. In some cases, ricotta cookies are one of my favorites, and they turn out so well that my husband's Italian cousin requires that I bring them whenever we go to like a family event at their house. It's like she wants those cookies. They're
nice.
Like really pillowy. Like the ricotta just makes them nice and light. And then my father-in-law and his brother had this tradition from their mom. These cookies, there's two types. They're the same dough, but one is filled and one's not. Tortilli and I'm going to do terribly with this. Quinolili. I have a hard time pronouncing it, but they're, it's a really interesting dough because it's got orange zest, and I want to say it's got a decent amount of oil and then vermouth.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of them get rolled out and just like into little kind of nubs, kind of like gnocchi, like little pieces. And then the other ones, you cut them in circles and you fill them with like a mixture of dried fruit. You get like a sweet kind of pasty filling on the inside. And then all of them, when they come out of the oven, they get tossed in honey. So they get this like coating of honey. So they're not overly sweet, which I love. Yeah, those ones were totally unlike anything I had before. And then there was also an Easter cookie that I documented making it with my husband's, I want to say it's his mom's cousin or one of those. I have a hard time keeping track of who's actually cousins and aunts and uncles and stuff.
I can help you with that.
Well, yes, you could. Italian families are so big. Like my family's not that big, and his family, it's like, it's in depth. So, but we watched her make it because she had a handwritten recipe from her mom or grandma, and we like took notes and we watched because you have to roll them and you kind of form them into this little flower shape. It's something that I don't think I could have figured out without seeing her do it. And that, again, like going back to when we talked about documenting recipes and things to look for, I was looking at texture, like when she was mashing it together, like what did the texture look like? How big were the oranges that she used or whatever, just like things like that really could make a difference in the final recipe. And that one also not super sweet, really great with tea or coffee, and nothing like anything I had had.
They sound delicious. I got me kind of thinking, oh, I need to branch out. You know, I tend to make the same ones because they're my favorites, but you've really got me thinking to kind of maybe try out some of these other types of heritage type of cookies, like those ricotta cookies. I'm really intrigued with. And,
that one, it makes a very big batch. They do freeze well, like uniced, either the dough or the baked cookies. But I've never been somebody who did like one of those. I have friends who do like an assortment of cookies that they give out to a bunch of people, like in a little tin or whatever, like a bunch of different types of cookies all at once. That always has seemed a little daunting to me, to like bake for days and days and put everything together and then hope everything stays fresh.
I agree. I haven't done that either. I typically just stick with one or two recipes and kind of just go with it that way.
Yep.
But I have a question about cookies and making cookies, because I can follow a recipe, not a problem, and I can get a good tasting cookie. But sometimes the consistency for me is not always there when it comes to appearances. So they might turn out flat or just not really pretty. Do you have like tips on that? Like, what's the difference? What am I doing wrong? Or am I missing something? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think there's a few things that can help. I think sometimes like the planetary alignment is just weird, and they're like, you're not going to have good looking cookies today, and that's just, they'll still taste good. But aside from that, one thing is, make sure your ingredients haven't been sitting in your pantry for too long, especially like leavening agents in particular. If they're too old, they might not work. And then the big note for baking, so I'm talking like baking powder, baking soda, things like that. But a big note for baking powder, and this goes back to the ricotta cookies, a lot of brands of baking powder contain aluminum. And I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but in my experience, especially now after being a verified super taster from a few episodes ago, I've noticed that those brands can create like a sour metallic taste in your mouth, especially if you're using a large amount of them, such as this ricotta cookies. I think it's a couple tablespoons.
Oh, wow.
So I ruined an entire batch for a cookie exchange once. I had to like start over. I was so bummed. So there are a few brands that make aluminum-free baking powder, and I'll link to a couple of them in the show notes for you. It's something I look for. Not everybody will notice it, but it can really sour the experience, pun kind of
Does
intended.
it say, how do you know, like if I went into my pantry and looked at my baking powder,
it'll say
does it
aluminum.
say it on the back? Okay. All right.
And then like the brands that don't have it say aluminum free. So I know Bob's Red Mill is one, and Rumford. I'm not sure if all of the Rumford ones or just they have some that are labeled aluminum free. And then, places change, so this information might not be accurate later on. The brand might change their formulation. But I did notice that when I bought the self-rising cornmeal, I think that the brand that I got used a brand of baking powder that had aluminum in it, because I got that same taste from it.
It's really interesting now that we know that you're a super taster and I am not. It would be really interesting to do a cookie test.
Right.
Because, my sweet tooth is kicking up here. I'm like, we could do it. And I'm like, oh, because I've never had, I am sure I just use the baking powder I get at the store. I've never looked at it. I'm sure it probably has, if it doesn't now, it did at some point, has aluminum. And I've never had any of that taste issue.
Well, I mean, in small amounts, you wouldn't necessarily taste it. I mean, maybe I would, but in fun fact, my mom did end up after that episode doing the same test with the food coloring to see, and she also has a ton of taste buds. So
that is so
genetic.
Cool.
And if you don't know what we're talking about, we did an episode, we'll link it in the show notes, where we did an experiment to find out if we possessed more taste buds than the average person. So that was, anyway, side tangent, but very important note about baking powder. And also, like, if you if you don't taste it, somebody else does, they could think like, oh, these cookies are awful, and you wouldn't know why. And, you know, it's ruined like pancakes, like anything that uses baking powder, it could potentially really mess up. So back to things that could potentially be going wrong with your cookies. A lot of people recommend starting with room temperature ingredients. So like for eggs, you can put them in a little bowl of warm water to kind of warm them up. I don't usually bother with that, but it could make a difference. Softening butter, you can, I know some people who tuck it into the waistband of their pants.
What?
It's wrapped. They tuck it in while they're getting stuff like in the back, like just kind of tucked in while they're going around the kitchen getting their other ingredients to kind of help their body temperature help soften it, which is kind of funny.
All right, I need a different tip on this one.
I have a different tip. You can take a glass and fill it with really hot water, like a tall glass, and then dump the water out, and you set it down on the counter over a standing up stick of butter and leave it for a few minutes. That can help. You could do the microwave on like a lower power setting. So say, just check it every few, like 10, 15 seconds to see how soft it gets, but maybe half power. So usually most microwaves, that's like 5 would be half power because full power is a 10. And then like cosmetically, when a cookie, like round cookies, not shape cut out cookies, but when round cookies come out of the oven, while they're still warm, you can take either a ring mold or like a big glass, and you kind of put it over the cookie, and you spin the cookie, the glass or whatever. I'm not doing a good job of explaining this without a visual. You cover the cookie with a glass or something round, and you kind of spin it so that you're touching the edges, and it kind of compresses them to make it round and even. Did that make sense? Without all my hand gestures, it's going to be confusing for people.
That
probably.
one, I'll confess, that one you lost me on.
Okay. If you have a cookie sheet.
Okay.
One cookie on the cookie sheet, if you're looking at it and it's the edges aren't very clean and round.
Right.
You take something round, put it over the top of it so that it's got to be bigger than the cookie.
Okay.
And then you kind of nudge the edges with the roundness of whatever you're using. I'll have to see if I can find a video of this and link that in the show notes. I'm sure somebody has recorded that. It's just to kind of coax the edges back to a round.
Okay,
shape.
So more uniform, to get it into a more uniform
yeah.
state. Gotcha.
Oh,
okay.
Goodness. And then also, if a recipe tells you to chill the dough, make sure you actually do it. Usually there's a reason that they want you to chill the dough. And I mean, most of all, just don't stress about perfection and have fun with it. They're still going to taste good, even if they aren't like the most show-stopping, Instagram worthy, Pinterest board approved, they're still going to taste good.
I don't worry too much about them being, and then I always figure if they look too ugly, then I'll just eat them and nobody will know.
Yeah. But, also, it's just called rustic.
Oh, yes.
If it's imperfect, it's just rustic.
Okay. Yes. I will be making rustic cookies for the family this year. Just saying.
Ever wonder where your family story began or who came before you? Tracing your family history can be exciting, but getting started can feel overwhelming. That's where Are You My Cousin comes in. Hosted by genealogy expert Lisa, this website and YouTube channel are overflowing with resources to bust through those brick walls. Discover hundreds of informative articles and engaging video tutorials packed with research strategies, tips, and tricks to untangle your family history. Whether you're a seasoned genealogist or just starting your journey, Are You My Cousin empowers you to uncover the fascinating stories of your ancestors. Visit lisalisten.com to explore the website and subscribe to the YouTube channel for fresh genealogy content every week.
All right, but so I have one more question about cookies. And so, you and I both have talked about making, food and making the cookies with our children. And so, well, my children are adults now. And I like to make cookies, to send to them, but our neighbors exchange cookies, each around the holidays, but I never really quite know how to package cookies so that I can safely either mail them or even, going around the neighborhood. I want to get them to the person, to the intended, but I still want them to look good. I don't want them to be all kind of like tumbled and crumbled and all of that stuff. So what are your thoughts about that?
So years ago, I asked one of my friends who is like an incredible baker and she mails all sorts of things, because I got kind of the same thing, especially with shipping. Like I didn't know what would hold up well, and I don't want to spend the time baking something and sending it to somebody for it to get there and not be good. So I'll link this in the show notes. It's an older post on my site with my friend Kellen. She said that in regards to shipping and packing, things like brownies, bars, cookies, and loaves ship really well. And brownies and loaves specifically can be made in advance and frozen to help keep them fresh. And I did try this once with the espresso brownie recipe that I have, where I baked them, let them fully cool. I cut them up, put them in the freezer, and then wrapped them the day that I was going to ship them, wrapped them with plastic wrap and foil maybe, and I shipped them out. So they stayed frozen for a little bit before they thawed. So they got like a little extra time of freshness in the mail, you know?
Okay. So you actually, literally, as you pack it, they were actually frozen.
They were frozen solid,
okay.
Yeah. So that was one thing. She said cookies generally ship well, but watch out for fragile ones like meringues. So like anything delicate probably is not going to ship well. As far as ones that aren't good for shipping, anything that needs to be refrigerated, obviously. Anything that has an exposed filling like a jam or is frosted usually ends up a mess after it's being wrapped.
Yeah.
And then she said, however, as long as the filling or frosting doesn't need to be refrigerated, you could always include it in a separate jar with some assembly instructions, which I love. Like, so say it's a sandwich cookie, give the individual cookies, put the filling in a separate container, maybe give them a little cute spready knife with it if you wanted to, and then they can just like fill their own. So I thought that was great.
That's cute.
So I asked her about freezing and packing for shipping, and she said her general rule for nearly everything is twice wrapped in cling film and then once in foil. She always ships using boxes, so no padded envelopes, and generally line the shipping box with crumpled paper or popcorn or bubble wrap for more fragile items. She said this was like 11 years ago probably, but she said she always has used the USPS priority shipping and ships on Mondays or Tuesdays to ensure that it gets there in the minimal amount of time and not getting hung up on the weekends. So you can check the shipping times and drop off cutoff times on their website. So that's a handy way to look at it.
Those are some great tips. I hadn't thought about shipping on like a Monday or Tuesday, but that's a really good tip. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
She also recommended, I asked about creative packaging tips, and she said, I try to wrap things individually and then in groups. So for example, I'll individually wrap brownies and then wrap 8 of them together. So 2 layers of 4. It keeps them protected and easy for the recipient to freeze or give them away once they arrive. And then a final wrap with butcher paper and some colored ribbon also adds a nice professional touch to whatever you're sending and makes it a little more special and gift-like. So, and there's lots more tips from her on this post that we'll link. But again, if you're spending the time to bake something and ship it to somebody, and shipping isn't cheap, like you would like to arrive looking nice, you know?
Right. Definitely. Well, thank you for that. I feel it's giving me some ideas as I already, I'm already thinking ahead about, oh yeah, okay, I can definitely do that. Or I hadn't thought about the freezing part of it. So I'm like, yep. I think things are going to go better this year.
Yeah, keep us posted. We need to know.
I will. All right, find the show notes with recipe links and Kellen's tips for shipping those baked goods at passingtheplate.org/41.
That's a wrap on this episode of Passing the Plate. We hope you enjoyed our journey into the world of food, traditions, and the amazing connections they create.
It's been a pleasure sharing these stories and flavors with you. Remember, food is more than just sustenance. It's a way to connect with our past, present, and future.
So keep sharing your meals, keep passing those plates, and keep creating memories that will last a lifetime. Head to passingtheplate.org/podcast for show notes.